Rain hammered against the glass walls of Manhattan's most powerful company the night Adrian Cole realized his billionaire boss was hiding something. It wasn't the cold stares. It wasn't the midnight meetings. And it definitely wasn't the way Ethan Sterling, the ruthless CEO everyone feared, watched him like he was the only person in the room. No. It was the moment Adrian accidentally overheard a conversation that was never meant for him. "Cancel the engagement," Ethan said darkly into his phone. "I'm not marrying her." Adrian froze outside the office door. Because Ethan Sterling was supposed to be engaged to the most beautiful heiress in New York. And because, seconds later, Ethan whispered something that made Adrian's heart stop completely. "I'm in love with someone else." Then the office door slowly opened. And Ethan caught him listening. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to the channel for more romantic stories. The rain poured over downtown Manhattan like silver needles, turning the city into a blur of lights and shadows. Inside the towering glass headquarters of Vail and Sterling Group, Adrian Cole adjusted his tie for the third time that evening and tried not to panic. "Mr. Sterling wants the quarterly reports tonight," his coworker whispered as employees rushed past. "And he's already in a terrible mood." Of course he was. Ethan Sterling, the youngest billionaire in New York, ruthless CEO, media obsession, and the coldest man Adrian had ever met. Adrian swallowed hard and gathered the files to his chest. He'd only worked as Ethan's executive assistant for 6 months, but every interaction with the man felt like stepping into a storm. Ethan rarely smiled. Rarely spoke more than necessary. Yet somehow, Adrian always caught him watching. Not with annoyance. With something else. Something dangerous. The private elevator opened directly into the executive penthouse office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, thunder flashing behind them. Ethan Sterling stood near the window, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a crystal glass of whiskey. His charcoal suit fit him perfectly, dark hair slightly messy like he'd been running his fingers through it all night. "You're late," Ethan said without turning around. "It's 8:30, Adrian replied carefully. "You asked for the reports by 9. A pause. Then, unexpectedly, Ethan chuckled softly. "You always correct me." Adrian blinked. "Should I stop?" "No." Ethan turned then, and Adrian's breath caught. Most magazines called Ethan intimidating. Some called him heartless. But none of them ever saw this version of him, eyes softer in the dim office light, exhaustion hidden beneath the sharp edges. For a second, neither of them spoke. The tension between them had been growing for months. Lingering glances. Late-night meetings that somehow turned personal. Ethan remembering Adrian's coffee order. Adrian noticing Ethan skipped meals when stressed. Little things. Dangerous things. Adrian set the reports down. "You should probably eat something." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Are you ordering your boss around again?" "Yes." Another faint smile. God, that smile was rare enough to feel illegal. Ethan stepped closer, loosening his tie. "You know," he murmured, "everyone in this building is terrified of me except you. That's because I've seen you fall asleep during board meetings." I was resting my eyes. You snored. Ethan laughed quietly, an actual laugh this time, and Adrian's chest tightened painfully. Because this was the problem. Somewhere between overtime and midnight coffee runs, Adrian had fallen hopelessly in love with his boss. And he could never tell him. Hours later, the storm worsened. Lightning illuminated the office as Adrian finished organizing documents. Ethan sat across from him on the leather couch, sleeves rolled up, watching him instead of the laptop in front of him. "You work too hard," Ethan said suddenly. Adrian didn't look up. "So do you." "I have to." "You don't." Silence settled between them again. Then Ethan spoke in a quieter voice. "You don't know what people want from me." Adrian finally looked at him. For the first time, Ethan didn't seem like a billionaire CEO. Just lonely. They want money, Ethan continued bitterly. Connections. Power. Nobody looks at me and sees a person anymore. Adrian's heart ached. I do, he said softly. Ethan froze. The air shifted instantly. Thunder cracked outside as Ethan slowly stood and crossed the room toward him. Adrian's pulse hammered louder with every step. Too close. Way too close. You shouldn't say things like that, Ethan whispered. Why not? Because it makes me want things I can't have. Adrian's breath caught. Ethan's gaze dropped briefly to his lips. And suddenly Adrian realized. Oh. Oh no. Ethan felt it too. Before Adrian could speak, the office doors burst open. A woman in a white coat hurried inside, rain dripping from her umbrella. Her expression was tense. Mr. Sterling, she said urgently, we have a problem. Ethan immediately stepped back, face turning unreadable again. What happened? The woman hesitated before glancing toward Adrian. Then she said the words that made the room go cold. Your engagement announcement leaked to the press. Adrian stared at Ethan in shock. You're what? Ethan looked stricken for the very first time. And he whispered. Adrian, I can explain. The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Your engagement? Adrian repeated faintly. Ethan looked furious, not at Adrian, but at the situation itself. Everyone out, he snapped. The woman in the white coat immediately nodded and disappeared, shutting the office doors behind her. Now it was just the two of them again. And somehow, that made it worse. Adrian stepped back slowly. You're engaged? No. You just said you could explain. Because it's complicated. Adrian laughed once, sharp and humorless. Right. Of course it is. He grabbed his bag from the couch before Ethan could stop him. Adrian. I should go. You're upset. What gave it away? Ethan moved in front of the door before Adrian could reach it. Even now, even visibly stressed, he was unfairly beautiful. Dark eyes intense. Tie hanging loose around his neck. Listen to me carefully, Ethan said. I am not in love with the woman they're talking about. Adrian's chest tightened painfully. You don't have to explain your personal life to me. Yes, Ethan said quietly. I do. That answer made Adrian look up. For one dangerous second, neither of them moved. Then Ethan exhaled heavily and rubbed a hand over his face. The board arranged it months ago. The board arranged your engagement? Adrian asked incredulously. It's a business merger disguised as a relationship. Ethan's voice dripped with disgust. Her family owns half the tech infrastructure we need for the Singapore expansion. Adrian stared at him. And you agreed? I had no choice. There's always a choice. You think billionaires are free? Ethan's laugh was bitter this time. Everything in my life has been decided for me since I was 22. Adrian opened his mouth, then closed it again. Because suddenly the exhaustion in Ethan's eyes made sense. The pressure. The loneliness. The walls around him. But it still hurt. Especially because for one reckless moment tonight, Adrian thought. No. He couldn't think about that. I'm still your employee, Adrian said carefully. This conversation is inappropriate. Ethan's expression darkened. Is that really what this is to you? Adrian didn't answer. Because if he did, he might confess everything. The next morning, the internet exploded. Photos of Ethan Sterling and heiress Sophia Loren covered every business magazine and gossip site in America. Billionaire CEO set to marry tech princess. The most powerful couple in New York. Adrian sat stiffly at his desk pretending not to care while coworkers whispered around him. "Did you see the ring? They're gorgeous together. I heard the wedding could cost 50 million. Every word felt like a knife. By noon, Ethan still hadn't come into the office. At 12:17 p.m., Adrian received a message. "Come to the penthouse. Alone. No signature needed." His stomach twisted. Ethan's private penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of the Sterling Tower. Adrian had never been there before. The elevator doors opened directly into a massive living room wrapped in glass windows and city light. Modern. Expensive. Lonely. Ethan stood near the kitchen in a black sweater instead of a suit, looking exhausted. "You came. You're still my boss," Adrian replied quietly. Something flickered across Ethan's face at the distance in his tone. "I hate when you talk to me formally." Adrian set his bag down. "Why am I here?" Without answering, Ethan crossed the room and handed him a document. Adrian frowned. Then his eyes widened. It was a contract. An engagement contract. Between Ethan Sterling and Sophia Loren. But across the final page, in bold black letters, were the words. "Terminated effective immediately." Adrian looked up sharply. "You cancelled it?" "Yes." "Ethan, this merger was worth billions." "I know. Your board will lose their minds." "I know." "Then why would you?" "Because I couldn't stand watching you walk away from me." The room went completely silent. Adrian's heartbeat stuttered. Ethan stepped closer slowly, carefully, like approaching something fragile. "You said last night that you see me as a person," Ethan murmured. "Do you know how dangerous that is for someone like me?" Adrian could barely breathe. "Ethan. I tried to ignore this." His voice cracked slightly. "I tried to be rational. Professional. But every morning I look for you first. Every meeting feels shorter when you're there. And when you smile at someone else." He stopped himself, jaw tightening. Adrian whispered, "You're jealous?" Ethan gave a helpless laugh. Pathetically. Something inside Adrian finally broke. All the months of restraint. All the stolen glances. All the feelings he buried because he thought they were impossible. He crossed the distance between them before fear could stop him. And kissed him. For one stunned second, Ethan didn't move. Then suddenly his hands were in Adrian's hair, pulling him closer like he'd been starving for this. The kiss turned desperate instantly, years of loneliness and longing pouring into it. Adrian melted against him. God. This was real. Ethan Sterling loved him. When they finally pulled apart, both of them breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against Adrian's. "You have no idea what you do to me," he whispered. Adrian smiled shakily. "I'm starting to figure it out." For the first time in years, Ethan looked genuinely happy. And that terrified Adrian more than anything. Because happiness never lasted around powerful men. As if proving the thought right, Ethan's phone suddenly rang across the room. Ethan ignored it. Then it rang again. And again. Finally, annoyed, he picked it up. What? The color drained from his face instantly. Adrian's stomach dropped. What happened? Ethan lowered the phone slowly. His voice was deadly quiet. My father knows about us. Outside the penthouse windows, lightning split the dark sky. And somewhere far below them, camera flashes already waited. The silence after Ethan's words felt suffocating. My father knows about us. Adrian's heart sank. Everyone in New York knew Richard Sterling's reputation. Founder of Vail and Sterling Group. Ruthless billionaire. Cold strategist. A man who treated emotions like weaknesses to exploit. And Ethan hated him. What does that mean? Adrian asked carefully. Ethan stared at his phone, jaw tight. It means this is about to become a war. Before Adrian could respond, the penthouse television flickered on automatically. Breaking news alerts flooded every channel. Photos of Ethan and Adrian kissing in the penthouse elevator played repeatedly across the screen. Someone had recorded them. "Oh my God," Adrian whispered. Reporters speculate secret relationship between billionaire CEO Ethan Sterling and male employee. Stocks for Vail and Sterling already falling after broken engagement. Adrian stepped back instinctively. This is bad. Ethan muted the television with visible disgust. I don't care about the press. But your company does. My company can survive. That's not what I mean. Adrian looked at him helplessly. Ethan, your father could destroy me. For the first time that night, fear crossed Ethan's face. Not for himself. For Adrian. He won't touch you, Ethan said immediately. You can't promise that. Yes, Ethan said darkly, I can. 3 hours later, they stood inside the Sterling estate. The mansion looked less like a home and more like a palace built for intimidation. Marble floors. Cathedral ceilings. Walls lined with portraits of powerful men who never smiled. At the center of it all stood Richard Sterling. Tall. Silver-haired. Sharp-eyed. He looked at Adrian like he was something unpleasant dragged in from the rain. So, Richard said smoothly, this is the assistant. Ethan immediately moved closer to Adrian. Protective. Don't speak about him like that. Richard ignored him. I spent 30 years building a legacy, Ethan. And you throw it away over a distraction? Adrian stiffened. Ethan's voice turned icy. You don't get to call him that. Richard studied his son for a long moment. Then he laughed softly. Oh, he murmured. You really love him. The room fell silent. Because Ethan didn't deny it. Instead, he reached for Adrian's hand openly. Yes, Ethan said. I do. Adrian's breath caught. Richard's expression hardened instantly. You'll destroy everything for this? No, Ethan replied calmly. You will. Something dangerous flashed in Richard's eyes. Careful. No, Ethan snapped, years of anger finally erupting. You be careful. Even Adrian looked startled. Ethan had always been controlled. Reserved. But not tonight. I spent my entire life becoming the man you wanted, Ethan continued. I built your empire larger than you ever could. I sacrificed relationships, sleep, freedom, everything. His voice shook with fury. And for what? So you could decide who I'm allowed to love? Richard's silence said enough. Ethan laughed bitterly. That's what I thought. Then, without hesitation, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folder. He tossed it onto the massive dining table. Richard frowned. What is this? My resignation. Adrian stared at Ethan in shock. Richard did too. You're bluffing. No, Ethan said quietly. I'm choosing him. The words hit Adrian harder than anything else that night. Richard's face darkened with disbelief. You would walk away from billions? Ethan turned toward Adrian. And smiled softly. Yes. Adrian nearly broke right there. Because nobody had ever chosen him before. Not first. Not completely. But Ethan did. By morning, the business world exploded again. Ethan Sterling resigns as CEO. Billionaire heir walks away from family empire. Secret romance confirmed. Social media went insane. Investors panicked. News stations camped outside every Sterling property in Manhattan. But for the first time in years, Ethan looked free. 3 days later, he and Adrian escaped the city entirely. No reporters. No board meetings. No billion-dollar expectations. Just a quiet beach house along the coast of Maine where the ocean stretched endlessly beneath pale gray skies. Adrian stood on the balcony one evening wrapped in Ethan's sweater, watching waves crash against the rocks below. "You really gave it all up," he said softly. Ethan walked up behind him and slid his arms around his waist. "I gave up a prison," he corrected. Adrian leaned back against him. "You know," Adrian murmured, "people online are calling me the man who ruined a billionaire." Ethan kissed the side of his neck gently. "They're wrong. Oh. You're the man who saved one." Adrian laughed quietly, turning in his arms. For a moment, the world felt impossibly still. Safe. Then Ethan reached into his coat pocket. Adrian blinked as a small velvet box appeared in Ethan's hand. "Ethan. I know this is insane timing," Ethan admitted nervously. "And technically I just ended an engagement, which isn't ideal." Adrian burst out laughing. But Ethan looked genuinely anxious. "I spent my entire life pretending," he said quietly. "I don't want to do that anymore." His fingers trembled slightly as he opened the box. Inside sat a simple silver ring. Nothing flashy. Nothing performative. Just real. Ethan looked at him with raw, unguarded love. "Adrian Cole," he whispered, "will you?" Suddenly, headlights flashed across the beach below. Both men turned sharply. A black SUV had stopped outside the house. 3 men stepped out. And even from a distance, Adrian recognized the Sterling family crest on the vehicle door. Ethan's entire expression changed instantly. Cold. Protective. Dangerously calm. Because the war clearly wasn't over after all. And this time, his family had found them.